Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, amazing people all around the world of crypto and blockchain. And I have somebody who I think is diagonally on the opposite side of the world from me, coming to us from Sydney, Australia. I have Art Abal. He is the co-founder at Vana. Art, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jamil. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad you're here too, and I love the accent. So let's kick things off and ask you first, what is your background then? Is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Yeah, and I love that you asked that question as well because I feel like a lot of founders come to crypto randomly, and I've actually taken the path of so before immediately before Vana, I actually worked in a large data company. So Vana protocol is all about data ownership, being able to aggregate data for value, right? Um, this is not a problem that I saw in the abstract. I worked on it directly. So I worked as a data sourcer at one of the largest companies, sourcing data for some of the AI tools that you might know, including ChatGPT, Google Ads, Google Search, and Facebook Feed. So I know the data that goes in there. I know how that data is sourced, and I know how that data is bought and sold in amongst these tech companies. And my co-founder and I kind of coalesced around the solution of Vana because we thought that there needed to be a better way and there's a better economic system through which data can be bought and sold. Immediately before then, I was working as a consultant, and then I was actually at Harvard while studying, working at the Harvard Belfer Center for Science and International Affairs, doing data research on supply chains as well. So developing social and environmental impact models with data. And that kind of leads into this kind of expertise that I've developed around developing methodologies to source data for AI. So yeah, kind of relevant. As you can tell, I'm not super crypto native. I've been very blockchain. I'm a huge supporter of decentralized technologies and blockchain, but crypto itself is something that I've just been very curious about for a long time. And blockchain was the perfect solution to this problem of how to create a market, an open market for data.
Very cool. I think so too. Um,
Yeah.
so I want to find out what Vanna is all about. And then you said, I didn't plan on asking you about this, but I think I should.
Yeah.
What are some of the problems with how data is sourced today, and how are you looking to fix that as part of your vision and mission?
Yeah, so I think about the problems both in terms of the supply side and the demand side. So let me start with maybe the supply side first, because that's probably closer to most people because you're all data creators. So as I mentioned, you're all data creators. So every day you go pay for your coffee with Apple Pay, you're logging onto online platforms to do a lot of work. You're creating data, like these little breadcrumbs that represent what you do and who you are every day. That to you, each breadcrumb is, you can think about it as, the mosaic, those artist paintings where if you zoom in, it's like a little picture. And then if you zoom out, it's like the whole portrait of that person, right? So those little pixel paintings. That's basically what you're creating with your data every day about yourself. And that is very important to you. But then in aggregate with a lot of other people, say, 10,000 people in a specific sample or data set, you end up being able to create trends and forecast trends. And those trends or signals are essentially what AI is trained on. And it's essentially what's used to predict your behavior. And that's why that's valuable. People will pay for that because humans are predictable and they can make money off that predictability. Um, so on the supply side, you're actually participating in this economy, but you probably don't already know. You probably don't know. You probably don't realize that the thing that you're creating is creating value for someone else. What that does is it creates information asymmetry on the supply side of the market, where you are not a participant and your data can be used for things that you may not actually want it to be used for. On the demand side of things, so the entire market is structured so that there's few people in the middle that are kind of constraining supply and demand. On the demand side of things, there are people who want to use your data for things that you might be aligned to. So on Vana, for example, we have a cancer data DAO, data collective, and they really want to partner with research institutions, and research institutions struggle to get that kind of data. So like there's this huge mismatch where there are people who actually want your data for things that you might want to use it for that don't get access to it because the market is constrained by these middle players that don't allow those data transactions to go through. So by decentralizing the market, what Vana's trying to put out there is you own your data, you can put it into these collectives, you can vote and use governance to determine what your data gets used for, and people who might want to use your data have to be transparent in terms of how they're using your data so that you can properly consent to the use of that data. And we think that that's going to be a more efficient way to develop technology as AI grows, with data fueling a lot of these technologies.
I can see that working well for AI, for the centralized AI.
Yeah.
So you have an app, right?
Hmm.
That gives users a simple way to earn using their data. Because a lot of people don't realize right today that they can earn with their data, right? So they don't see it as an asset, but you help them see it as an asset, right? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about data ownership is it's very kind of ethereal for a lot of folks because we just create this thing that we think byproduct is that we think is a byproduct, which is data. Um, we have been doing a lot of R&D over the last 3 years on how to make people feel like they own their data. And the closest thing that we've come up with so far is the ability to use that data, and earn from it or feel like you're getting value from it. So it's like the kind of let's show, not tell. Let's not tell people your data is valuable. Let's show its value by allowing you to convert it into a tokenized asset and allowing that asset to be freely traded so that people can speculate on the price of data. That's essentially what one can do in the Vana ecosystem. You contribute your data to these data collectives, some through our app, um, and you are able to then uh, claim a token that represents your data that can be freely traded on Vana's native DEX, which is the data DEX. And that is essentially how we're trying to bring people into the idea that their data has value, it has economic value, in a world of AI.
Yeah, I see. It was funny because right before this call, I got a call from American Express who
Okay.
um, said Raul Mohammed has added himself as a co-signer and an application for your credit card. I'm like, what?
Huh?
I was like, what? Who is that? I had no idea who this person is. I never heard the name before in
Wow.
my life. And I'm like, well, no, that's false. That's fraudulent. And then I
Yeah.
went, and then I went and I, what do you call it, security on the credit unions,
Yeah.
and froze my accounts. But I'm like, when you said earlier, people get information and they trying to use it against you, you know,
Correct.
and I'm like, that is a problem that is persistent across
Mhm.
society. How do we best protect ourselves from people getting our data and we not wanting them to get our data, and how do we because we're not can't rely on companies to be security for us. We have to be secure
Absolutely.
ourselves. So how do we do that?
Yeah, it's a really good point, especially that last point about companies, because like I don't know what it's like in the States, but in Australia we've had several large companies have massive data leaks in the last year, and it's just an absolute nightmare for anybody whose data has been leaked in those attacks. Look, the ideal solution in mine and my co-founder's mind is a vision kind of like how we've managed to secure our money with crypto. It's a self-custody solution. Why is it that we trust like folks on your podcast would know this, like, we're all ideologically aligned to the fact that we can't 100% trust banks with our cash money. So why are we 100% trusting corporations with our data money, basically? And that's the convenience of cloud is, I think, analogous to the convenience of a centralized bank. And so we need to start to think about ways in which we can take that back and say, no, 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 I don't want the convenience of this because I want the control and ownership of this thing, which is incredibly valuable to me. You've just cited an example there, Jamil, of like your identity could have cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions even. And that's partly because of these insecure systems that we place trust on in the same way as we place trust on traditional banking, and we've kind of taken that back in Web3. So we have that's why I was saying like I'm really supportive of decentralized and blockchain-based technologies, especially when it comes to data, because I think the next revolution is for us to see that A, data has value, and B, we shouldn't trust that value with anyone other than ourselves. And that's the ideal future state of what Vana's looking at, where you are the custodian of your data. When you use an application, you're writing it back to wherever you've decided to custody that data so that you're always in control of that. And the original design of the internet was this actually. Tim Berners-Lee's original internet was that you would carry a device that would have all of your data and compute with you at all times. But cloud computing and the emergence of large tech companies has really turned that on its head. But I think we're coming back to this idea of no, 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 no. Don't trust you guys. You're the least trustworthy people out there. I need that. That's mine. I deserve to have it.
Mhm. Yep, I agree. But not only like data that we've created, right? But we're also creating, IoT and
Hmm.
sensor and all this stuff that we don't even see or even tangibly, we don't even think about, right?
Yep.
So how do we monetize that?
I mean my perspective and again from the protocol's perspective, if you've created it, so if you've bought a device that's created data within an environment that you control, that should be your data. That says something about you. I don't know if your users your viewers have know about the Roomba controversy around like basically if you have a robotic vacuum in your house, chances are it's taking images and specs of your floor space and monetizing that somehow. It's subsidizing the cost of your vacuum. And I'm thinking to myself, no, I would rather pay those costs and have that data to myself. I don't want anybody in my private space. And then, you see the physical AI revolution with the 1X robot, Neo, and the fact that that robot in your house, when released, is going to be teleoperated by a random stranger in a building in the United States if it starts to encounter situations that it's not familiar with. That's terrifying to me. I'm like, that's my space and my data. And what these examples kind of highlight here is that um, we think of our data as personal stuff, like our address, our phone, our information, and all of that stuff. But just like the mosaic tiles in the image, like the little picture mosaic, each of these little things, when joined together, paints an entire picture of you. And that's what's the most terrifying thing, that it's not just, oh, you have a door in this place, or you wake up in the morning and have coffee. It's those little snippets that, when pieced together, it's your identity. It's your digital persona that represents your real persona. That's valuable. And that's valuable enough for you to want to protect.
So what you're saying to me in these last 10, 11 minutes is this concept of we should all be thinking in terms of commoditizing what we do on a daily basis, right? How
True.
and no people don't do that. How can we shift the mindset for people on a global way to be able to start
Yeah.
thinking about what we do as commodity?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to think about, well, first of all, we need to be conscious of the fact that we are creating that commodity. And that's what Vana's doing by giving you a token to represent that thing that you're creating, the data that you're creating in a data set that has value. So we have a collective action problem here in terms of data. Your data on your own is not that valuable to anyone other than you. But when aggregated with a lot of people, it's valuable to a lot of like large tech companies to AI. And so we needed, and again, part of the design of the Vana ecosystem is we needed a way to bring the data together to create that collective value. So I think the first thing to do is to create a system or to adopt a system generally where we're able to feel data's value, and that's Vana. And the second thing to do is, and this will happen naturally, hopefully, once you see that something has value, you're incentivized to protect it. Kind of like, I always draw the analogy of you get a receipt or yeah, you get paid for dinner and you have a receipt. If I could claim that back from work or something like that, I'll put it in my wallet because that piece of paper suddenly has value and I want to protect it. Whereas if I can't claim it back, I just throw it in the bin, right? Right now, we're just throwing our data in the bin because we're not claiming the value of that thing. And so I think that this shift in mindset of earning for yourself through your data actually starts with being able to actually earn, and then the protection of that asset comes afterwards.
Yeah. And also people have to think that their life has worth and value too before they
Oh
start even
God,
start
yeah. And I think it's really extractive right now, to be honest. I think like you think about these mega profits that a lot of these AI companies have developed, and that's off the back of largely our data. The fact that we're not getting a small royalty every time an OpenAI call is made is in some views unfair because our data's gone into that. And I know because I used to source that data.
Nice, nice. Well, you said something earlier that kind of struck a little bit of a area of interest because what I hear in the narrative is that you said you have a cancer DAO, right?
hmm
A lot of people have said that DAOs have failed miserably and are no longer valuable, but data networks, cancer DAO, like any kind of DAOs, special interest, they can actually reshape the future of innovation, right? How can they? I think they can still do that. How can they do that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think there's a couple of pieces that make it different in the data space. One, the data is coalescing around a real asset with value, which is the data set. So the token doesn't just represent, your entry into the club. The token represents a true asset and your share of that asset. And I found that the DAOs are most successful when the token represents like a true asset in that community. So DAOs around tokenized land or DAOs around communities that own things. Like if if you feel like you actually have a skin in the game of a real asset that you can sell, that changes the nature of the DAO. The second thing that's really important here is that the DAO needs to be able to coalesce around a very specific issue or topic that's really important to them. And a lot of the data collectives that have come to Vana, um, like the Cancer DAO is a really good example of this. A lot of folks who are involved in that one are survivors of cancer or are relatives of folks that have survived cancer. So they're motivated beyond just I guess the financial potential financial upside of this. They're motivated because the cause is very close to their heart and they want to see progress. They want to put their data into this ecosystem so that they can see cures for things that currently do not exist. A really good example of one that's not on the Vana ecosystem that I absolutely love is HairDAO. Are you familiar with HairDAO?
Mm,
So
no.
HairDAO, I think, I'm pretty sure it's on the Bio ecosystem. Shout out to those guys, love you. They're a group of individuals that have suffered hair loss or are concerned about suffering hair loss. And so they've contributed both capital and data and research towards solving this. And they've actually created products that the community is using that seem to be as effective, if not more effective, than some commercial options to deal with hair loss. And that's a really good example of like a mission-aligned data community that's able to produce something for that community itself. And that's what we're in the business of building at Vana as well.
I like that. I like that. Yeah. I am, well, depending on who you talk to, if what I had was cancer, I am a cancer survivor. So,
Okay.
yeah, desmoid tumor in my back for
Yeah.
4.5 years and finally kicked it. I'm not,
Yeah.
other people have not been so lucky.
Yeah.
They're in the community on Facebook and it's like kind of like, you know, um, people are like, well, it was me, but nobody's coming up with a solution, right?
And it's fascinating because we're at the point now where, you know, I don't we're at the point now where AI can help us with these problems, and it should help us with these problems. But I was doing some research on social environmental impacts and supply chains. And I was originally asking survey questions, long-winded story, but basically, I decided that I was going to look at people's Facebook data instead, because that shows you more about your day-to-day life and how it evolves and grows. And it struck me that Facebook probably has enough data right now on everyone in the world to cure some of the world's most pervasive illnesses. So, Facebook could probably help us to understand the drivers of poverty, to understand the drivers of mental health challenge, maybe to even understand how some of the determinants of cancer, the early determinants of cancer. They have multi-year time series data on every single person. And it always drew the question of why haven't they developed that technology yet? And it's simple because the Facebook feed gets them more money. And we need to think about a better way to develop technology as a society because we're missing so many of these amazing opportunities to make ourselves better, and to cure some of the diseases that ill us as a society. And I think if we can find a decentralized way to deal with data, that's really the crux of the problem.
So if you were Zuck, what would you do?
If I was Zuck, I'd probably be less successful, but I would probably um, I'd seek user consent to be able to contribute this data towards causes that users care about. If you got and you or your community of cancer survivors got a notification on Facebook saying, "Hey, we want to fuel cutting edge cancer research to see what the early determinants are of this particular cancer. Would you be willing to participate, provided that you can trust the entity?" This is why it needs to be on decentralized rails, right? That's why Vana exists. But like, imagine that you could trust Facebook for 1 second. Would you say yes to that?
So
Yeah, and I think that that's people who are affected by things and care about things want to. This is what I'm talking about. People who want to use their data for something are unable to in this current market. We need to find a better way for us to contribute the value that we're creating towards technology that we actually want.
if they were contributing toward that, I would say yes. If
Yeah.
if they're contributing to their bottom line for their shareholders, I would say no.
It,
So
right. And I think that this is why decentralized communities actually matter because, again, I go back to that hair DAO example. Those guys care about solving hair loss because they personally got skin in the game. And
yeah,
um, they're developing technology in a really cool way. And we've got a similar thing happening where we're developing a user-owned foundation model with Flower AI, where it's people are like, I love foundation models. I would love to contribute to it, and I would love to own a slice of that. Can I do that? And at Vana, we say yes, and you should.
awesome, awesome. So we're talking about AI innovation. We're
Hmm.
talking about fair and ethical AI innovation. So how do you best achieve fair and ethical AI innovation?
Oh, that's a very tough question. Um, so I studied economics. So, you have this one theory of innovation, which is you need to have everything be privately owned, to create competition for the best technology to emerge. But the whole open source school of thought in technology has kind of turned that on its head. We saw Stable Diffusion, Stability AI, a lot of open source tools like Llama come out and say, no, 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 AI is a public good, so therefore it needs to be open source. And you're seeing a lot of open source models come out of China as well. Um, I think, and there's a huge debate between open and closed source in terms of driving innovation. I'm a futurist, so I think about what is the best way to get the best technology out there, but I'm also a humanist, and I believe that technology must serve humans at the end of the day, and money is not a human. So humans need to be at the end of that. Um, so that's my framework for ethics of whatever system in place that lands somewhere between open source and private ownership that makes sure that the technology that we develop advances humanity in the most efficient way. That's kind of really high theoretical, but like in practical terms, what does that mean? I, I think people should be able to vote for what technology they want based on the data that they're contributing to it. Again, if you created the value, why are you not determining the technology? And when I say vote, I mean that in a very loose sense, but like in the same way as we use our money to vote to some extent, we use our money to determine what goods and services exist in the world. We should use our data to determine what technologies should exist in the world, because that is ethical, that is human driven, that is also futurist because people want a better world for themselves and for others. So, um, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but this is why I think it comes down to data. Like it's a fundamental building block in AI that all of us create, and if we want better AI, we have to have better control of our own data.
trying to think about blockchain innovations in this case.
Yeah.
There have been, so from what I've taken from what you said so far, the future of blockchain should be open source.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
okay, not hybrid and not private between only companies.
Yeah, I think we're kind of touching on something that's very live right now as to, what is this Web 2x, Web 3 world that we're kind of moving into right now. I think it's great that we're able to get credibility outside of the niche communities in Web 3. But I don't think we should lose our soul as a community. The Web3 revolution is all about self-sovereignty. It's about self-sufficiency, but it's also about collectivizing around things that we care about, notwithstanding the institutions that already exist in society. And I think if we lose that, then we lose our soul as a community. And I'm not supportive of that in the slightest. I'm, I'm, I think it's very, very important for us as a community to maintain the reasons why we exist. And I think there are few use cases out there that actually point to the reasons why we exist. But those use cases should proliferate.
Yeah. Blockchain is the first time I think in human history where you have this intersection of technology, finance, and social good, right?
Yeah.
And
Like
a lot of people have lost sight on that.
I think so. I mean, what's your take on what's happening right now? Are you optimistic? Are you cautious? I'm more cautious. I would classify myself as cautious.
I I don't. I'm optimistic, but there's a lot of stuff that's going on around the seeking of money only and shorting and longing and 1000x that I don't like.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think enough people have. I think a lot more people have lost focus on what the meaning or the value of blockchain is, or less people know who came in recently know what the promises are.
Mm.
You know, and I'm hoping people will understand that over time.
I think eventually they will because I take almost like a technological Darwinist theory of like if this technology isn't useful for this use case, then the other technology will emerge as the victor. And so there are things that, I again go back to the broken record. I think that a decentralized system for data is the only solution that's optimal for the individual. And so once we understand data's value, that's going to emerge as a use case. I think there are many use cases out there where blockchain is not the optimal technological solution for the problem. And that's usually the sniff test for whether it's something is speculative or not. But for me, I'm just like, well, I'm optimistic that those things are going to die, and that what will remain is this very nice collection of things that actually make sense on chain, and that are actually really optimal for us as a community.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I see blockchain as a technology that's going to last forever, but I
Yeah.
don't see the treasury companies that are building themselves up on top of blockchain lasting on top of Bitcoin lasting forever. But I do see the blockchain lasting forever. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think I see it lasting forever for a subset of use cases. Is everything going to be on chain? I'm not 100% sure about that yet.
so talked about blockchain. We talked about AI,
Hmm.
robotics, right? What do you think the next wave of robotics will be in its relationship to blockchain?
I was actually on a panel in Korea recently, um, and I asked this question of I love how everyone in Web3 is talking about robotics, but can somebody please explain to me why a blockchain-based robotic solution makes more sense than something that is not on the chain? And I don't think anybody provided a satisfactory answer to me. I have in my mind where it can help. One of the issues right now in robotics is scaling the data and being able to ensure that that data represents real world examples. So if you think, this goes back to your IoT point. We have a bunch of devices that are already capturing everything that's happening in how we interact with the physical world. None of that data is, well, to my knowledge, being piped into these robotics training pipelines, but it could be. at some point, and we could also do decentralized capture of that data. We have a scaling problem in robotics where a lot of robotics companies are just trying to generate data in labs. So you can think of some pretty, I would say, borderline unethical conditions where people are literally just teleoperating machines trying to create data for robotics. It's kind of warped if you think about like a really bad sci-fi of like humans just become teleoperators for robots that roam around the world and enjoy life. That's kind of like where we're at right now. And so I think that blockchain probably has a solution for that, where we can live our day lives and kind of create data for robots that then help us and create this more symbiotic style relationship. But I do have like I actually there are images you can go find them online of like robotics teleoperation factories, and it does feel like some weird sci-fi horrible stuff. So, my thesis on robotics in Web3 is I think that the robotics space is still very early, even in Web2. There's a lot of research that's being done. One clear area of need is the ability for these robotics companies to get data at scale. Other than that, I think it's all fairly theoretical. There was one thesis, I can't remember which company it was, said that if a robot comes up to you in the future, you're going to want to be able to check its code on an open source platform to see that it's good. And I'm like, that's not how I deal with devices in Web 2. Like, why do I use a Stanley mug? Well, because Stanley's a good brand. I don't go and check its manufacturer and say, like, has this been manufactured well? Like, so I'm not necessarily sold on that thesis, and I haven't really found compelling other theses for why blockchain is the right solution.
Got it. Well, it sounds like you do know a lot about crypto. So
I know a lot about blockchain. I don't know, like, I mean, honestly, I think that tokens are a different game. Somebody asked on my Twitter, like, are we, can somebody decide, are we crypto or are we Web3? And I'm like, I think I'm Web3 more than I am crypto.
I'm already branded, so I can't change. but, but I can thank you for being on my show today. This is wonderful, fun conversation. So
Great.
thank you very much. And
No, thank you.
I have one last question.
Yeah.
It's easy. So how can people find out more information about you and about Vana?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, RDR88, or you can go to vana.org and find out information there on us and our data collectives. And also follow Vana on Twitter at Vana.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Jamil. I really appreciate it.